All right, welcome back to The Explainer. In our last discussion, we really dug into the idea of simple reproduction, where the capitalist system is basically just sustaining itself, running in place.
And we saw how, even in that kind of static loop, that core relationship, between capital and wage labor, it just gets reproduced over and over again. The worker keeps coming back to sell their labor, and the capitalist keeps coming back with the capital to buy it.
But here's the thing, right? Capitalism is almost never static. Its whole nature is about growth. So that brings us to the really critical question. How does that perfect circle of just repeating itself become an ever-expanding spiral? Well, the answer is all about accumulation.
So let's get into it. Removing beyond just simple maintenance, we're going to explore how the system shifts from just repeating itself to expanding on a bigger and bigger scale. This is where Chapter 24 of Capital really kicks in. Marx points out that surplus value, and remember, that's the value workers create above and beyond their own wages. It isn't just pocket money for the capitalist's personal spending. No, it's the very fuel for growth. It's destined to be turned back into new additional capital.
Okay, so what's the actual mechanism here? What is the secret that turns this circle into an ever-widening spiral?
This idea of reconversion into capital is key. It just means that instead of spending all the profit they make, the capitalist reinvests a portion of it. They use that reinvested profit to buy more stuff, more raw materials, more machinery, and, crucially, to hire more workers, which expands the whole operation.
And what you get is this really powerful feedback loop. It's not a one-and-done thing. It keeps feeding itself. More capital lets you hire more labor, which then produces even more surplus value. That new surplus value gets turned into yet more capital, and on it goes. This is the relentless engine of capitalist growth.
Now, to really grasp the huge social consequences of this spiral, Marx asks us to do something interesting. He says, let's go back and look at the surface of the market, the sphere of circulation, where everything is just being bought and sold. And on that surface level, everything seems totally fair. The worker freely sells their ability to work, the capitalist freely buys it. They look like two equal parties in a contract. Property is being exchanged for property. It really seems like a realm of mutual benefit and equal exchange.
The whole system is built on this foundational idea, this starting premise. Property is what you get from your own hard work and from the fair exchange of things of equal value. But Marx pushes us here. He asks, does this whole process of accumulation, this constant spiraling growth, does it actually stick to that founding principle? Or does it, through its own internal logic, actually lead to the complete opposite?
Okay, let's really dig in here, because this is the core of the argument. Marx unveils this stunning dialectical reversal, where a principle literally flips into its polar opposite, just by following its own logic.
So to show us how this happens, Marx sets up a little thought experiment. He says, look, let's give this system the best possible starting point. Let's just assume the capitalist's initial capital, we'll say it's £1,000, was genuinely the fruit of their own past labor. They saved it, they worked for it, and now they're using it to start their business.
Now, just follow the logic on the timeline here. Let's imagine our capitalist makes £200 in surplus value each year and uses that for their personal living expenses. In year 1, they consume £200. After year 2, that's £400 gone. By the end of year 5, they have consumed a total of £1,000. This is the critical moment. The entire value of their original £1,000 has now been spent. It's gone.
So, to answer the question on the slide, where did the £1,000 that's now in the business come from? It can't be the original capital. We just saw that's been all used up. The only possible source is the accumulated surplus value. The capital that remains is simply the materialized form of others' unpaid labor.
Of course, classical economics had a justification for this, a kind of moral story known as the abstinence theory. The argument was that profit is the rightful reward for the capitalist's heroic act of abstaining from consuming their wealth and choosing to invest it instead.
But Marx just dismantles this with the simple fact we just established. The capitalists did not abstain from consuming their original £1,000. They spent every last bit of it. What they abstain from consuming is a portion of the surplus value that was extracted from their workers. That's what they reinvest.
And right here is where we see the great reversal in its starkest form. The law of property, which started out with the premise of owning the fruits of your own labor, has transformed through its own operation into its direct opposite, the right to appropriate other people's unpaid labor. The end result is the total separation of labor from property.
This reversal doesn't just change where the capital comes from, it actually establishes a whole new law of property, one that's based on appropriation, not on exchange.
The separation of property from labor now looks like the necessary consequence of the very law that, at the beginning, seemed to unite them. It's not an abuse of the system. For Marx, this is the system working exactly as intended.
So this new law of capitalist appropriation, summarized here, means that property and labor are now fundamentally divorced. The worker's own past labor, which is now embodied in that accumulated capital, comes back to confront them as a power that commands their future labor. Think about that for a second. Their own product becomes the very instrument that keeps them needing to sell their labor power in the first place.
With this, the simple circle of reproduction we started with is completely shattered. The system isn't just maintaining itself anymore. It's now driven by an inherent, relentless need to grow, to accumulate, and to expand the power of capital by continuously converting unpaid labor into more capital.
This relentless logic really sets the stage for our next explainer. Now that we've established how capital accumulates, we have to confront the consequences of this process for the working class. And we will tackle that in our look at Chapter 25, The General Law of Capitalist Accumulation.